Okay, picture this. Imagine a company that started out with one incredibly niche goal, just helping people play video games with slightly better frame rates. A company that literally almost went bankrupt multiple times and spent decades building technology that nobody seemed to need. And then, almost overnight, they became one of the most valuable entities in human history. It's a massive paradox, right?
So how exactly did a struggling video game hardware company become the unquestioned king of artificial intelligence? Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Because the crazy truth is, from ChatGPT to self-driving cars, almost every major AI breakthrough today relies on technology that NVIDIA didn't just stumble upon. They spent 30 years quietly preparing for this exact moment.
Section 1. 3 engineers and a vision. To really understand how we got here, we have to go back to 1993 at a Denny's diner in California. 3 engineers, Jensen Huang, Chris Molokowski, and Curtis Priam, made a massive bet. They believed that complex visual graphics would eventually beat the dominant CPUs of the era. But man, the 1990s were brutal for them. They burned through cash, products failed, the competition was absolutely ruthless, and they almost went completely under. But then, in the early 2000s, a lifeline appeared. The video game industry absolutely exploded. Gamers were demanding hyper-realistic virtual worlds, and NVIDIA's graphics cards became the gold standard. That gaming boom essentially saved the company from the brink of death.
So, they survived. Actually, they thrived and became the kings of gaming. But here's the catch. CEO Jensen Huang wasn't thinking only about games. While the gamers of the world just wanted better graphics, Jensen was secretly laying the groundwork for something infinitely bigger.
Section 2. The secret supercomputer, CUDA.
And this brilliantly illustrates what gave NVIDIA its ultimate superpower. We have to look under the hood at the fundamental technical difference between a CPU and a GPU. See, most people looked at a graphics processing unit, a GPU, and just saw a toy. Jensen looked at it and saw a supercomputer. Think of your standard CPU like an incredibly smart professor who can solve very complex problems, but only one at a time. It's sequential. A GPU, on the other hand, it's like an army of thousands of students working together. They might not be as individually complex as the professor, but they can perform thousands of calculations simultaneously. For certain types of heavy computing, you just can't beat that simultaneous architecture.
That realization is what led to the mid-2000s launch of CUDA. Now, CUDA was a software platform that allowed developers to use NVIDIA's GPUs for tasks that had absolutely zero to do with gaming. We're talking scientific research, complex simulations, and eventually machine learning. Now, at the time, investors thought it was a foolish, totally misunderstood bet. It just looked like a costly niche side project. But quietly, this software laid the inescapable foundation for an absolute monopoly.
Section 3. The AI gold rush arrives.
So for years, CUDA just grew in the shadows, until the paradigm shifted. Deep learning arrived, and suddenly, AI models required an enormous, almost incomprehensible amount of computational power. What used to take months could be done in days, but really only if you had NVIDIA's infrastructure. By the time the world woke up in November 2022 with the launch of ChatGPT, NVIDIA had already built the roads and the bridges. Millions of people interacted with advanced AI for the first time, and powering all that magic behind the screen were thousands upon thousands of NVIDIA GPUs.
It was wild. Suddenly, every single major tech titan, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Anthropic, xAI, they all found themselves in a desperate race, and they all needed NVIDIA hardware to compete. Demand didn't just grow, it exploded. NVIDIA completely transformed into the ultimate seller of picks and shovels during the greatest technological gold rush of our lifetime.
Which perfectly brings us to this point. Today, data powers the digital economy. But data alone isn't enough. You need computation. Look, for decades, we've heard that data is the new oil. Well, oil is completely useless without an engine. And NVIDIA's GPUs are the engines of modern AI. These companies aren't buying these chips because they want to. They're buying them because they absolutely have to. In a trillion-dollar race, you simply cannot afford to be left behind.
Section 4. The unbeatable ecosystem moat.
Now, you might be wondering, why are massive, resource-rich competitors like AMD, Intel, and even Google struggling so hard to challenge NVIDIA's dominance? Well, the answer is a moat that took decades to dig. It's an entire ecosystem. It is not just the hardware. It's the hardware, the software, the developer tools, the AI frameworks, the data center solutions, and above all else, CUDA.
Developers have spent years, sometimes their entire careers, building on top of NVIDIA's specific platform. To switch to a competitor isn't just about buying a different piece of metal. It's astronomically expensive, incredibly time-consuming, and massively risky. That ecosystem is the invisible wall keeping everybody else out.
30 years. That is how long Jensen Huang played the long game. Unlike so many executives who are just obsessed with the next quarter's profit margins, he invested billions before AI was trendy. He built CUDA years before the market ever understood it, let alone demanded it. Great companies don't just react to the future, they architect it.
But this brings us to a pretty massive, slightly uncomfortable question. Can NVIDIA's dominance actually last forever? It's been a spectacular rise, but as we know, the technology sector is notoriously unforgiving.
Section 5. Risks and the future.
History makes one thing crystal clear. No company remains completely dominant forever. It's rarely a matter of if competition will arrive, but rather when. And the hurdles ahead, they're incredibly real. Governments around the world are actively moving to regulate AI. Competitors are heavily funding their own catch-up efforts. Major customers, like those tech giants we listed earlier, they're trying to build their own custom, in-house chips just to reduce their reliance on NVIDIA. Plus, there are ongoing geopolitical tensions centered around Taiwan, which is where these chips are actually manufactured. And honestly, technological paradigms can just shift rapidly and unpredictably.
Yet, even with all those very real risks, NVIDIA sits squarely at the center of what could be the biggest technological transformation in history. And these aren't just abstract tech concepts. We're talking about your future healthcare, your children's education, and the transportation systems of tomorrow. Every AI revolution starts with computing power, and today, for sure, NVIDIA is the undeniable supplier of that power.
Which brings us to the absolute core lesson of this entire explainer. The biggest opportunities often look unimportant for years, until suddenly they become everything. NVIDIA succeeded because they have the sheer foresight to invest in tomorrow's possibilities, even while the rest of the world was entirely focused on today's profits. They were ready when the future arrived.
So, I want to leave you with this final kind of provocative thought to ponder. What is the next seemingly unimportant technology being built quietly today that will inevitably become absolutely everything tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you want to keep exploring the hidden forces and fascinating stories shaping our future, stick around and I'll see you in our next deep dive.